So let's move on to discussion items. Item 8. Yes.
So item 8, as you can see from the attachment on the agenda, has to do with having the council be accessed more by the community. So generally, we always meet here at the city capital, the chambers here. So when we had the legislative analyst, I worked with her and she put together this document about the benefit and lack of having the council to meet around the city. I think as we work for equity too, and all these other things that in many cases in the particularly minority group from participating, it is important that the council, in my opinion, goes around the city and meet once in a while, and hopefully that can increase participation. So that's what this document is about. I wanted to bring it forward to leadership here so people have access to it, and then if it is possible, as soon as we get the legislative analysts on board, we would like her to pick this up. I know we have the government reform committee in place. They may come with recommendations as to how this moves around. But I want to make sure that there's a movement around this, and so as we move forward into next, council, I want to move this forward and see if we can have council meet at least, around the city, maybe. Have one meeting scheduled at least once a year around the east side, the west side, and maybe the north side of the city. But I think this will help us accomplish some of the equity requirements that we have, but also on some of our population who struggle with child care, parking, and all this kind of stuff. So that is what this idea is about, but I wanted to bring it here for discussion before the legislative analysis is in place and ask her to pick this up and see how we can move it forward while we work with the recommendation that may come from the government reform structure.
Any questions? Comments? Oh, Rebecca?
Well, just on this and the next item, as two of my colleagues here are on the Task Force on Government Reform, this is very much this topic of not just council meetings, but other committee meetings and other how city business gets done, and the participation of residents has been a huge topic, is a huge topic going forward. And I think we're going to have multiple recommendations around how to increase resident engagement with the city on all levels, including the council. So for sure, there are going to be recommendations. When I saw this come up again, thank you for bringing it up. I appreciate it. I sent this to the chair of the committee and asked, I should have sent it to you too, but I didn't. I sent it to the chair, Harrington, and asked her to share it with members of that committee, just as yet another piece of work that's already been done towards this. Likewise, on the next item, that is a kind of a recommendation that would be part of, it's one of these extremely complex moving parts. You can't just do something like this and not have it affect other aspects of the council. For example, we're considering for the first time 4-year terms for alders and maybe some at-large alders, and so there's a whole kind of messy bit of recommendations, or maybe not even recommendations, maybe just analyses of consequences of different actions that will come out of it. So I feel like for us to really take any action on any of these discreetly, we really should wait for the work of that body to come before us, and then, raise these as issues that, have been important to you, that have come up in front of CCEC, but to do it in that context and not, I'm just worried if we try to do some action on these two things before that full-bodied report and recommendations come out, they'll really either fail or it'll just be very confusing.
And I think that, I should say, because we were talking about 8, and then you brought up 9, so if anyone has any comments on 9 too, that's okay, as we discuss this. But the 2-year term has been discussed before we had the tax force.
8 and 9.
Yeah, we're gonna do 8 and 9, sorry.
Okay, so 9 is the attorney, I think we will have to see something.
Can I just make a
Yes.
suggestion? If you're going to talk about 9, I would give some an opportunity
Yeah.
to.
Yes, I will, I was just bringing up 9
making the overall,
because,
Yeah.
overall point of TFOX is dealing with both of these
Right.
things, and process-wise, that, just my suggestion would
that's
be
okay.
to
That's okay.
advocate for these things within that process, where, you know, a lot of
Of the task force.
of the discussion and analysis is already happening, and to advocate for these within that process that's already moving and has a lot of, you know, has 100% support of the council for the process itself. So that was just a suggestion, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to get into the content of any of those.
Okay, so do we have any more comments on 8?
Yes.
And, no.
No, I don't.
And I also thank you for forwarding this on to Ellen, and if you can send a copy to Attorney May. And we will, do you have any comments on 8?
Yes. So yes, I think, thank you for forwarding it. I just think that when the report of the government reform structure come, I don't know if they will go into detail of all the things that they will recommend. And so at this point, I do think it is important that this move forward in terms of investigation and what needs to be part of it. So that if, for example, by the time the recommendation from the TIFA comes out, this would have been mature enough for implementation. Because I'm thinking that by the time we hear the report or we get the report from this group, many of the things that they recommend, we have to look into it in detail as to how it is implemented or how it can be implemented. So, and I don't know if this should wait, that long. So the fact that it has been already started, I want the process to be mature, at least all the investigation that need to be done around it, continue to happen so that by the time we get the report, this is one thing we can implement basically right away. So that's the reason why I want it to be reactivated as soon as we get the legislative analysts start work and see how that move forward. I mean, probably by the time we say yes or nay, we will have gotten the report from the government reform structure. But I do think it is important that, as we alluded to, apart from the council, but other committee members be structured, or at least set up their meeting in a way community members are able to participate. So that's the reason why I think it should still be ongoing while the other things are ongoing. I'm not looking into voting it yes or no, maybe before we get the recommendation from the group, but I do think it should continue on.
And I guess just to clarify, what I was suggesting is that if you want to get this thing going, get it going also in, bring it to the TFOX,
Right.
have that work being done in that context, so that they're not two separate paths, but that it's really integrated into the work. So I'm saying, yes, continue, whatever, work on this particular thing, but bring it into that process as well,
Okay.
so that that work can be informed by the concerns and the work already done by the health officer.
I wanted to make some comments about that, just kind of follow up to. I've had an opportunity to go to a lot of the task force meetings, especially on the Common Council, and the work that's being done there is incredibly detailed, and as Rebecca said, very complicated, because there are so many things that are there are pros and cons, and so many things that are interdependent, depending on at large and stuff like that. What concerns me about the 2-year term is that's something that we can do right now in the sense of after when the council votes again on the president, they can decide that they want that president to be there for another year. So what I don't understand is what the rush is to put in a 2-year term when the council has the ability right now to vote for a president for a second year after the end of the first year. So I think there are a lot of things that are incredibly fascinating and need to be taken, that will hopefully come out of the task force. for changing the structure on the council, in my opinion. The president and vice president issue isn't, in my opinion, as much of an issue because the council has the ability to vote for people for a second year. And so, in the meantime, while we wait for those recommendations that the council decided that they wanted somebody to be there for a second year, there's nothing that stops it. So I'm trying to understand, unless I'm missing something, what the rush would be to change it.
Let me just say that I don't think it's a rush. This is a subject that we have talked about before.
Okay.
So it's not a subject that just came up. Just to give you some
Sure, I appreciate
perspective
that.
on that. Marcia, and is your hand up?
Yes.
Okay.
So I would like us to let the city attorney get us
Oh.
started on what is out there first before we can go to deliberations, then we can address.
So are
some
we
of
on
your
number
questions.
9? Is that?
Yeah, I think we are number 9 now.
Did you want to talk about number 8?
I did just want to make one comment. I
Sure.
wasn't clear from what you said and what you said, if they're kind of going in the same path. I thought I heard you say, Samba, that you wanted the council, the CCEC, to do a robust discussion. And then I heard Rebecca saying this should also happen here. So I just want to make sure I understood what your goal is, if it's also going to TFOGs.
So my goal is basically to inform this group, which is the leadership.
group?
Yes.
Okay.
About this effort. So everybody start thinking about it. This started when Heather was the legislative analyst. So as soon as he left, I slowed down on it. I didn't have much time to spend on it. But now that we are getting a legislative analyst again, I wanted this to be revitalized, be activated. But before I reactivate it, I wanted this body to know about it. What Rebecca, I think, is saying is that that is a good idea, but she's also shared it with the TFAG group just so they know. And kind of, as they walk through whatever recommendation or looking into they do, this be part of it. So in addition to that, what I was saying is that by the time the recommendation is implemented, or at least when we get their report, it is very likely many of the things that they recommend we have to do a detailed look into it and find a way to really implement it and stuff like that. So what I want to happen is that I think this is overdue. So I want this to go in tandem with what TFAG is doing, so that by the time they recommend, if this is part of their recommendation at all, then we are able to implement it basically right away.
And then so now what I'm hearing is you're going to ask Karen, our new analyst, to take a look at this report.
Yes.
Work with council leadership
Yes.
and CCEC to see if there's more that we can do to then direct it to TFOGs if that seems the right direction. Or just keep it, or would it come back to here and you'd say, here's what we've done since we last discussed it?
So I think the fact that it is forwarded to TFAG already, TFAG will be looking at this along with whatever else they are doing. But like I want, if there's any more work, like there's a lot of work that Heather did in this, if there's more additional work that needs to be done, I want the next legislative analyst to be able to do it.
Just have her follow up and then
Yes.
kind of report back to you
And then we keep informing
this.
this body about it, and
Thank
then
you.
we hopefully eventually be able to implement it sooner than later. So Attorney May, is that the next item?
Yeah, well, just one moment. So we're going,
Are we done
are we
with
done
8?
with 8? Any more questions on 8? Okay, so we're gonna go to 9. Do you wanna set up 9, or do you, well, we'll go to Attorney May.
Yeah, so basically I asked Attorney May, obviously to look at this and see what is out there in terms of the legal requirements. So I will let him speak to that, and then I'll speak to why I think we should bring this forward.
It's a pretty straightforward ordinance. It changes the terms of the president and vice president from 1 year to 2 years. This has been discussed in the past. It has never gone forward. It is being discussed in the TFOGs group as one of a number of options that might be recommended. I don't know what more there is to say about it. I won't get into the question of whether you should do it now or wait for TFOGs, but it is an item that they are discussing. I could see you could argue this, if we did this now, it'd take that item off the table, and that group could go forward knowing that one thing has been settled. On the other hand, it may be something that group would not recommend based on some of the other things that it might do with the recommendations. So So you had asked for us to draft it, this is what the draft looks like, it hasn't been introduced yet,
Right.
and it was just put together to discuss it at this meeting.
Yeah, so I wanted the draft to come here first before anything is introduced, so we can have a discussion around it. So again, this stems out of when Denise and Mo were in leadership. And so it happened that, for some reason, Denise felt like there was a need to continue her term and their term or something. Also, it comes out of my experience being the vice president, eventually the president, and what that means. So I do have a very strong feeling that in order for one to be effective, being a leader of the council, 2 years makes sense in order to be very effective. And so that is another thing. The other thing is that personally, I hate going to my colleagues and asking for vote. And so I think this will smoothen the relationship amongst us if we can align it with our terms. If you're elected for 2 years and then somebody is elected at that time at the end of the year, maybe the person will come or something. But at least I think it will make our relationship even more smoother than going in amongst ourselves and asking for vote. But I do think it will be, it will help leadership to be much more effective. If you are vice president for 2 years, by the time you become president, I think they would have given enough exposure and experience to be able to move the council forward in a much more effective way than if you're there just for a year. Again, I understand that TFAC is there and they are looking into all this stuff, but I don't think there's anything that can really stop us from being able to implement this at the beginning of the next council. One thing I've said to Seri and the people that I've spoken to about this is that I am not interested in being the next president. I will not seek to be the next president. So this is for whoever chooses to be the next president and the next vice president. So I am not interested in that, and I want to make that very clear. So this is for whoever else. So that is where it is. I do think we should be able to implement this. And then to answer your question, this is not a rush. If you want to do it this year, fine. If you want to do it in the next 10 years, I'm just thinking that it's a good thing to do now. But if people feel like it's not, then we can do it when they feel like it's the right time. But there's no rush in this. Like I said, I'm not interested in being the president of the council next time around. It may be maybe 10 years if I'm still here and I'm doing politics here. But for now, I'm not. All right.
Thank you. Barbara and then David. David, then Barbara.
Mike, if we vote on it next year, say, just wild example, if Sherry's the president in April, and we voted on it after that, as part of TFOG or something else, it wouldn't apply to her term anyway.
You would want to make this effective at the next general or next
Right.
election rounds.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that council members elected, they choose the
Right.
president, and that person serves for 2 years.
Barbara.
The reason that I would support this notion is that when you begin work in 1 year, you really want to, sometimes this work is very in-depth and you start on a process and then it's 1 year and you don't, it changes. And so as we are really looking long-term on what we're doing as executive committee, we want the opportunity to start a task, research it and process it and work it through. It's very, very difficult to get things done in 1 year because just as you start and you get into the next year, you may or may not be elected, but the work might start to change. And so I'm looking at it more as a continuation of work that is started so that it can continue and not if there's a 1 year change. I mean, being an alder, learning to be an alder and all those twists and turns, so you don't learn it in 2 years. So as we're looking at long-term implementation of the work that we do, once we start on a work, we should be able to continue that work, and oftentimes it's not completed in 1 year. So I'm looking at more of a consistency over time. And as we're elected for a 2-year term, it just makes sense to me to have that continuity throughout. And I hear what my colleague was saying is that, yes, we have the opportunity to elect another president for a second year, but if we take that off the table, the work that the executive committee has done continues for a 2-year period, and you get something completed and something, the work is started, completed, and done.
Oh, sorry. Marcia?
So, I think when the effective date of this ordinance really makes a difference, because if it started next year, then the following term starts, if it started this year and then there's an election next year, you can't really serve necessarily for 2 years, so there's that. So I guess then it raises a question, what if the person quit mid-term? We've seen that. What are the kind of procedures to have an election, or, it seems like it's silent on that, and maybe it doesn't matter, but it's just thinking out loud that there's no process, or there's no process to say,
Maybe
hey,
a
we didn't
special
really think you were that
election.
good, and maybe we don't want you to serve another term. It's.
Or another year.
Maybe you really had a year and thank you so much. I'm just being sort of sarcastic, but I just think this is silent on those questions. And I think generally I tend to agree that we should have a TFOGS help us make this decision. And personally, I think that the turnover in presidents is an opportunity for people that would be lessened if it were a 2-year term for a 2-year election term. So if it were a 4-year term and then you would serve 2 sets of people that seems more maybe possible, but it just seems, to me, you lock it in, yeah, you get the benefit of experience and effectiveness, but you also lose the opportunity to share the benefits and, to share it among other alders.
Rebecca? Oh, I'm sorry. Paul after Rebecca.
So on this one, also, I'm just going to say the same thing again. Whereas in item number 8, I think we could just decide to meet at different places before TFOGS is done, and that would be fine. This, though, because of, you just noted 1 or 2 complications of the change that isn't addressed in the ordinance, and that there's just so many interlocking pieces of the potential changes to the actual structure of council, and this proposal that, it would maybe make sense in recommend for, one set of recommendations, not at all for another, and it wouldn't matter one way or another for another. And because this work is ongoing, I think would not be wise for us to bring this forward as a separate resolution until, I think this should be debated within the TFOGS and fully fleshed out along the lines of all of the different possible permutations of new council structures we have, and then brought forward at that time. But I think bringing it as a standalone something right now is not wise. I would not support that. But I would support, for those who are strong proponents of this, to come and make those arguments especially at the CCEC subcommittee of TFOGS. So that subcommittee can have the benefit of those points of view.
Paul?
Thank you. I was not going to speak to this for that very reason. That this is the purpose that TFOG exists, and I'm not going to speak to the merits of this because it's premature, and I think you said in a kinder way what I was prepared to say, that this is counterproductive, and if we move forward with independent actions like this, why would we even have TFOG?
Yeah.
Let's just keep muddling along. I mean, the TFOG is meant to be more cohesive, to look at everything together. We would be looking at a little piece here which could affect other parts. So this is premature.
Barbara, is your
Right.
hand up?
Just as a follow-up, in the consideration, I heard more of the person serving in that leadership position rather than the continuity. What I'm looking at is the continuity of the work that is performed in this body. So that's what I'm more concerned with, that there's a consistency and the continuity of the work. And having a break in that leadership, does that affect the continuity? Does it affect the agenda of the executive committee as approved because there's a break in leadership? So it's worth considering. I think it's very, very important, and looking at that 2-year survey. But if it's better fit into the other discussions, that's fine, but it really should look at a continuity of programming. So that's why I would support it.
Any other comments? Then I want to make mine. I do support this. I don't think we have to pass it tonight, but I do support the 2-year term. I support the fact that in leadership roles, you do need some kind of consistency to be able to push forward the goals and the items of the council forward. A lot of times and let me just say to Marcia's comment, what if the president isn't good? Well, I've been involved with the council for many years. I can tell you half the folks think the president ain't any good and the other half think that president was great. So we're never gonna get 20 people to say that person was fantastic, right? So we know that. And so, but I do feel that we have to have some consistency, and maybe this is what TFOG will look into. I think that when we have a year, and what's important to me, and I'm just using myself, that I feel it's important to lead the council. The following year is not important to Rebecca, and the next year is not important to Dave. And then you have all these items that are sitting on the table, right, that no one wants to bring up because it's not their priority anymore. And we see this time and time again. So whether we, vote on this or discuss it any further tonight is up to the group. But I do want TFOG to really look at not the person, the consistency in what you're able to accomplish. Any other concerns?
I have one, not a concern. So would that mean then executive committee appointments would be 2-year terms too? Because currently 1-year terms, and when the new president's elected, they appoint a new CCEC.
Have to look at the
Okay.
ordinances and see what it says.
Just wanted to,
This gets into there are many moving parts here.
Right.
right.
And when you change one part, you have to see how it impacts everything.
Sama.
Yes. So, again, I know TFAG is there. Do we want to relinquish everything that has to do with governance to TFAG? If that is the case, then I'm okay with all these things waiting until when TFAG come up with something. I can understand moving the city around, the council and other committees around, but I do not understand why we should wait on TFAG for the term of the president to be 2 years. We are coming into an elections. In fact, it will align better if, for example, I'm so by the time we get the TFAG report, I don't even think we will be able to implement all their recommendations by the next elections. And so I think we can undertake this. I mean, this is just a draft. If some of the concerns that we have, we can look into and make amendments to the draft and make it better and address some of the concerns that we have. But if you want to relinquish everything that has to do with the running of the council and all this other stuff, governance-wise, to TFAG, then we can do that as well. But I do think this is something we can undertake now. It doesn't have the complications where the city attorney's office and us cannot make recommendations to what is already drafted and be able to move it forward. But again, like I said, I am not interested, even if I were to win elections next or this year, to be council president. But I do think it is important for effectiveness. I know doing it every year give people much more opportunity, more people have opportunity to lead, but is it just enough to lead? Or there's more to it than just being called the president or the vice president or something. And so for me, there's more to it just than being called the president and vice president. And so more the reason why I think we should be able to walk through all the complications that we are identifying now and be able to implement this as the new council comes in. Again, there's no urgency on my side, but I do think it is important for us to be effective as a body, particularly as a leadership.
Marcia?
Just have one more comment. I hear what you're saying, you know, why abrogate our responsibility? I guess I would just say to that, well, I wouldn't vote for it. So if you know, if that's an outcome that could, you know, preclude something that might be worthwhile, but that's just my opinion. But I raised my hand because I thought back to when Barbara was first elected. And I'm gonna call you out because you were inundated with people like, I'm running for council president, will you vote for me? And you're like, I don't know anybody. You know, and think next year, there's 10 new people coming. And if it's a contested election, all those people are gonna be have to decide on a 2-year thing if that were to go forward. And I'm not saying this is a way just to stomp it out, but I just want you to think about what it's like to be a brand new alder and having, on your first freaking day, have to pick somebody for 2 years. And so maybe you turned the timing a little bit past that election, so people get to know you. I mean, I think there's solutions, but I just wanted to remind you, because I just thought of you, and I don't think you even voted.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, and I remember going, you didn't vote for me. Just wanted to share that.
I think it's just as traumatic as voting for someone for 1 year when you're brand new.
Well, I
Right.
agree, but,
Yeah.
but 2 years I think is longer.
It's longer, but you're still voting for someone you don't know.
Yeah,
Me
exactly.
being here in 2015, I can tell you, you're still voting for someone you have no idea. You're basically looking at smiles.
So my
Barbara.
comment is that I keep hearing the person in leadership, and maybe that's why I'm getting off track. And I'm looking at a deeper continuity of the programming and the goals that this body, not the leadership, sets, and the working through the programming and the goals that this body, and it's the work that we're looking at, and I would hope we don't focus on the person more so than the work that comes out of the body of work that we are. So that's where I am. I'm not the person, not looking at the person. I'm looking at the quality, the content, and the integrity of the work, body of work. And so once you invest in the body of work, the continuity is to making sure that body of work continues through. And so it's not just one, not the president and the vice president, it is the body that really feeds into what that goal, what that process is, and what that body of work will be.
And let me just say, before I call on Rebecca, this is not a voting item. Go ahead.
So just
Rebecca.
off of that, just as an example of why we should not have this voted on before TFOGS finishes its work, is that TFOGS can and will discuss that as an issue. And they may find that having a president for 2 years is the solution to that. They may find that having no president, but having a stronger CCEC and distributed leadership in CCEC is that solution. There may be another solution. There may be, 5 different solutions to address that continuity of policy work question that is not just dealt with by this solution. So I just really strongly urge the proponents of this, please bring it to TFOGS. Let's work it out within TFOGS. Let's not try to vote on it, because I really think it'll fail if just because TFOGS is already working on it and the council is behind TFOGS. No, 4 of us are on that group. Several of us are on multiple subcommittees. We're doing a lot of work. Let's debate this and other recommendations when it comes out of that body and not try to short circuit that process.
But it's not a voting item tonight.
Right.
Okay.
I'm just,
Oh, okay.
making the point.
Okay, so there is a presentation upstairs, and if there's no other discussion on this, then I'm gonna need a motion.
No, we didn't have a motion.
Oh, to
Well,
adjourn.
no, I just have
Oh.
one future agenda item.
Okay,
Alder
sorry.
Balde, we wanted to bring Alder Matt Fair
Waste time
and
so you don't
Sheila
have to.
here too, to talk about the education committee.
Yeah.
They've
Oh,
been
yeah.
trying to meet to talk about where they're going, but I looked over the last 3 years and they've had 6 cancellations out of the 12 meeting dates every year. So I think Alder Balde would like to, so we'll add them to the future agenda.
Yep, so
items.
next meeting, I would like them to come and talk to us about it. So what I wanted this body to hear and before we schedule and it becomes something else, so.
Okay.
All right.
Vote to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. There's only five.
Okay.
Are we okay?
We're supposed to be in Chicago today.